This is Firecrackers, and we are talking about celebration of Salah amid economic hardship. Now we are also joined by Ituno Abioro. He's a former ADC chairman in the State. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, alright, so I'll be starting with my guest here in the studio. How did you see the spirit of festivities for this year's Salah? Because normally, I don't know, from my part, it seems as if the spirit is down, but do you share the same sentiment?
I could remember last year when across the street there was a lot of festivity. You could see up to like 6 to 7 cows, right? But this year, I checked the same place. The animals did not come until very early on the very first day. And I also reached out to my friends that is Salah celebration, where is my share of meat? So those that used to give me like about 3 buckets of meat, they reduced it to 1 bucket. In fact, one very big allergy that my friend just gave me just a takeaway plastic, and which I was counting the meat, and I said, oh guy, it has not. Formally he delivers it, but I had to keep on reminding him. And he even told me that he didn't have enough money to dispatch. I said, don't worry about the dispatch first. So I think that we are not still seeing the benefit of the reforms, right? There have been some reforms in place, but there's still a bit of poverty, right, within the state. We've not really seen the business sector really expand. We're not seeing true economic output or economic productivity. A lot of people are still struggling, let me put it in that way, and prices keep rising day by day. Yeah, we're seeing a bit of stability, we're seeing a bit of the stability in the FX, we're seeing a bit of stability in the prices of fuel, considering the intervention by the private sector within that particular space. But there's still hardship in the land, and it's far beyond what we used to see in previous times.
Definitely. So now to our virtual guest. The president mentioned that we should keep sacrificing, as this is a season of sacrifice. But now the question is, how much more do Nigerians need to sacrifice? Seeing that we have always been urged to be patient, to be resilient, and we've been doing that since 2023 and up to now. So how much more sacrifice do Nigerians need to make before we start enjoying the dividends of democracy, so to speak?
I think that's the multi-million-dollar question. How much, how much, how much more is expected of the average Nigerian to give? And yes, what your person in the studio said is actually right. He's even lucky he got takeaway plastic. Nobody sent me meat this year. It's strange, but none of my friends sent me meat this year. And I kind of feel bad, but I also understand that even I did not kill anything this year. So the truth of the matter is, I don't think anybody in their right frame of mind would say they are richer now than they were 2 years ago. And I don't think there's anybody who can come and say, oh, they experience it easier, because apart from being a politician and being every other thing that I am, once upon a time I used to be a cab driver, and I'm very proud of that profession. The problem is that the same distances that we charge 5,000 naira for and got 2,000 naira in profit is the same distance we charge 10,000 naira for, or we get only like maybe 1,000 profit. Because fuel is about 970 naira per liter where I am.
Is not easy, and I feel like that's part of the segment that a lot of us are not really talking about. That is for transport and traveling. For this year, I would say a lot of people, well, for people who go to their family houses, they will go to family houses to celebrate. At least if one person is killing whatever animal that they're killing there, that's still okay. But now one has to factor in the cost of traveling for Lagos State to other states, and then it might just be that might just be too much, especially if it's one thing when you're traveling, and then when you want to calculate the cost of coming back, by the time one adds a little money, perhaps that could even buy a ram. Let us look at also the impact that the removal of fuel subsidy to some of its attendant consequences of the celebration of Salah, especially now that people cannot travel because of high cost of fuel?
So the eve before the Eid day, I just went to Bega just to look at cost of traveling between Lagos and Ibadan, and I heard that the cost of travel between Lagos and Ibadan is 10,000 naira, and I said, wow. In fact, a family of mine made a trip on the Eid day, and they said it came down to like about 9,000 naira just between Lagos and Ibadan, and I said that's also because they said probably there's a bit of traffic, there's a diversion, and here and there. And I could remember 2 years back when I was still on the road, I could move from Lagos to Ibadan with 500 naira. Once I get to interchange, those that understand that, right? But I can't take those risks again at this point in time, right? So, but let's look at it, right? We'll see that the government is advocating for people to use the CNG platforms, right? We see conversions, easy conversion kits. We also see the number of conversion centers increasing. We'll see that, but the CNG platforms have not really come to stay. And
Okay, so you have to forgive me for disrupting the flow of your thoughts, but we need to go on the commercial break right now. So when we come back, we'll be talking about, well, the government saying that we should prioritize CNG vehicles, their availability, and how probably some of these operators too are even cheating us. So do stay put. We'll be right back. This is Firecrackers, and we are still talking about celebration of Salah amid economic hardship. And my guest in the studio was talking about the government urging us to make use of CNG powered vehicles to reduce cost.
So when you look at it, the cost of fueling a CNG vehicle is relatively cheaper, about 66%, 67% cheaper than the cost of fueling the normal using either petrol or diesel, right? So, but when you also take another side to review it, just like the guest and the virtual guest said that they've been a slimmer profit margins, right? And something about Nigerians is a lot of people are opportunists. Once they see that, okay, once you get, a lot of people do not have that patience. Even if you get to the bus stop, you see a lot of queue, rather than everybody to cooperate and say this price is too high, reduce the price, not because they don't want to, but once they see, yeah, just like in Nigeria, anytime it rains, people will increase their fares, right? Even Uber drivers too increase their fares because it rains. But man, you're still covering the same distance, right? I understand you might need to use your windshield and the rest of them, but there is no significant why I should pay 2x the prices because it's raining than when it is normal weather. So also try to play devil's advocate to look for their own side. We get to the market, the cost of goods and services have increased, the cost of school fees is increasing, landlords are making rent for their money this time around because you're seeing almost people in the real estate sector doubling their prices in the cost of their rent and hospitality service. But we also look at the average cost of living in Nigeria has significantly increased. But when we look at the inflation rate has reduced, seems to driven by the basing effect because we're first measuring our inflation compared to 2010 figures and 2010 indices, but now it has been revised to 2024, and we see a bit of stability because of the FX foreign exchange volatility that is stemmed as a result of CBN interjection. So that means if CBN has not interjected or pumped in like about $80 million into that system over the last 1 week, 2 weeks, we are not still going to see that stability that we really drive. So what we're seeing is that the hardship is still there, and a lot of opportunities are taking advantage of that particular hardships. But what can force people to be able to drive things down? Let's look at the classical case of the bag of rice. As of December, the bag of rice was trading for like about 100,000, 108. But now it's trading within the range of 65, 75, thereabout, depending on the choice of the bag. But what happened? What really happened to the bag of rice? We saw a major player in the industry come into the production of rice, and that stemmed it down. So when there's a lot of supply, right? So imagine that same time that same bus that you're entering at 1,000 naira because it's rain, when they are like about 5 and nobody is ready to pick, everybody's going to reduce their prices. So once you have more supply over demand, that can be able to force a lot of pressure for the greedy ones not to take advantages, and also for everybody to be able to live affordably. But the more we don't have enough supply to be able to address those particular demands, the more we are likely to see people taking advantage of the opportunities. But when it comes to hardship, the government is really trying to bring a lot of stability. The ways and means window, which the central bank used to allocate money to the government, has been shrinked and has been reduced. We saw that the federal government pay down the IMF COVID loan, although it's also intending to increase the World Bank loan, which is even much more. So when they celebrate the government for paying back the IMF loan, I said, no, that is just, it was due to be settled at that point in time. Look at the increased exposure. You're trying to advocate like about a $20 billion dollar loan from the World Bank. And I could remember the position of the finance minister as of 2023, which said that, oh, we don't even need to take loans. And now is the one advocating for loans. I know it can be a very difficult task to manage because you want to drive some particular initiative, you want to drive some particular agenda, and based on the outlook of the security or based on the outlook of the economy, you still need to go and rely on IMF that is going to force you to devalue your currency, that is going to force you to remove subsidies, that is going to force you to further expand the poverty gap. So we need to take a bold decision on how do we want Nigeria to play out over the next couple of years. Everyone has a role to play in that.
Definitely, definitely. And not to our virtual guest, Itu Abiora. So now I would like to call in upon your experience as a former transporter, or maybe current transporter, I'm not so sure. So the issue with CNG powered vehicles and the vehicles that uses normal petrol, we are not seeing so many differences. We have so much differences when it comes to price, because for people who use CNG powered vehicles, they are still charging almost as high as people whose vehicles are powered by petrol. So what do we have to say about situations like that, whereby we have alternative, a cheaper form, but the people that are controlling these vehicles, they are still making life tough for Nigerians? How do we manage that?
To answer your question, you would need to understand the level of shock that I experienced when I went to Katsina State the first time earlier this year, and I realized that pure water was cheaper in Katsina State than in Ogun State, where I am. And I know Katsina is a desert, and I know that Ogun is named after a river, which means there's water, and pure water is still more expensive in Ogun State compared to Katsina State. And it shook me to my core, and it's still one of the things that makes me understand that Nigerians are Nigeria's #1 problem. To the issue of copying what happened with the issue of rice, yes, the bigger player there being India had a glut and decided to reduce the restriction on their export of rice, which actually flooded the global rice market, which brought down the price of rice here in Nigeria, because of course a lot of people took advantage of buying ultra cheap rice and selling it at a premium. Ordinarily, under normal circumstances, a bag of rice based on the volume shipped out by India should not be more than 35,000. But people are still milking the system dry and still trying to make a killing out of the misery of Nigerians. So you have to understand the issues. And so these are man-made issues. These are not government issues. These are issues made by the citizens, making life difficult for citizens themselves. But it is because there is an enabling environment for them to do so. That is why they are doing so.
Of the studio have said, do you think if we have more CNG powered vehicles in Nigerian markets, do you think that would make these people, the few people that are using CNG now, drop their prices to be lesser than people who are using the petrol powered vehicles in Nigeria? Because since what we are seeing, the reality of the day is, for people who use CNG and the ones who use premium motor spirit, they are still charging the same prices for transportation. So do you think that might also come to play if a lot of people are converting or now buying CNG powered vehicles?
Yes, I actually agree that it's a question of supply and demand. I believe that if you oversaturate the market, it will force the prices down. It's a question of how do people get their access to their CNG. I know that I was discussing earlier a few days ago with a former commissioner for finance in Kaduna State, and we were having a conversation, and I said, what if we had more people converting animal manure into compressed natural gas and using that as part of their vehicles? Everybody has access to animal manure, from cattle to cows to goats to poultry, is able to use a biodigester. And then he said, That's actually nice, but who is going to fund it? And I think Nigerians need to actually start to look at alternatives and proactively become energy secure.
All right. Thank you so much for that.